I am Tanya Meisenholder. I'm the Director of Gender Equity for the NYU School of Law 30 by 30 initiative. So happy to be here with all of you today. It's Women's History Month. We have a great panel moderated by our fabulous co-founder and dear friend of mine, Ivonne Roman, who's going to ask these wonderful ladies some questions about their careers. Just a couple of house cleaning issues to start with. As a reminder, we are recording, so please keep your phone on mute. We don't want recording to go out that has something on there that you don't want the whole world to hear. You can ask questions anytime. Raise your hand, put them in the chat. We'll do our best to address them. The recording will be up in about a week on our website. And so we'll make sure that everyone has that as well. So make sure you're muted. Please feel free to ask questions, and just a few highlights on 30 by 30. If you didn't have a chance to see it, if you're not on our mailing list, we just released our first impact report. So please take a look. It talks about all of the progress that we've made over the past 4 years. And we're really excited to continue to work in this space, especially with our partners from NALI. And we have President Gina Hawkins on board today, and also our partners from WIFLE, the Women in Federal Law Enforcement. So happy to do that. And then I'll give one more quick shout out because it's right around the corner. The NALI conference is coming up. There's a lot of information on their website. If you are able to go, then please take a look. It's an absolutely fabulous event. So I am going to turn it over to Ivonne, who will do introductions and start the session, and we'll go from there. And Ivonne, thanks so much. And Gina, Carmen, Janeé, it's so good to see you. I'm thrilled that you're here and can't wait to listen to the conversation.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. I'd like to welcome you all to the 30 by 30 Power in the Pivot webinar on advancing women in law enforcement. Like I was mentioned, I'm Ivonne Roman, and I'm honored to be moderating this discussion as we explore how women in policing navigate career transitions, leadership opportunities, and new professional challenges beyond the badge. Women in law enforcement often face unique hurdles when considering their next career move, whether it's stepping into leadership or transitioning to a new sector or redefining success on their own terms. So today, I'm excited to hear from our 3 accomplished leaders who have successfully made these pivots, and they'll share their insights on overcoming barriers, expanding their networks, and embracing new opportunities. Our panelists today are retired Chief Carmen Best of Seattle Police Department, now the Director of Global Security Risk Operations at Microsoft. We also have former Chief Janeé Harteau of Minneapolis Police, who's the founder of Pivot Point 360. And we have Assistant Chief Deputy for Cobb County, Gina Hawkins, who's also a former chief, and the president of NALI, the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives. So I'll kick it off.
One quick thing, we had a little bit of a technical issue for Janice, so she is on. She's just not on video, if you don't mind introducing her as well.
Oh, so we did have 4 panelists. I'm so glad she made it. Janice Ayala is a DHS, Department of Homeland Security, former executive. She's retired, and she's a current board member of the Women in Federal Law Enforcement. So Ayala, I'm glad you were able to make it. So I will start off with our first panelist, which will be Carmen Best. Your question is, career transitions are sometimes out of a person's control, especially during times of organizational or societal upheaval. As Seattle's police chief, you navigated leadership during a complex and highly charged moment in policing. How did you approach your transition, and what lessons can leaders draw from what you experienced, and how to pivot in unexpected moments?
Well, that is a great question. I would say this. I went through a lot of it very publicly, a lot of challenges during my tenure there at the Seattle Police Department, and particularly like many agencies, the post-George Floyd time of social unrest. And so a lot of what you have to have, and it applies even today, is good emotional intelligence, just understanding where people are, how they're viewing it, different perspectives. I see it one way, you may see it another. For example, I can tell you when all those folks sort of after the fact landed in Seattle and took over the precinct and a large area around that precinct, some people viewed it as just a big block party, and others of us were deeply concerned about, what that could lead to, and ultimately did lead to, actually. But so there, but you have to be able to understand another person's perspective, at least consider it, even if you don't agree with it, and have those conversations. It was not an easy time, and at times, good to see you there, Ayala. But yeah, but at times it became super challenging and hard to listen, but you have to be able to listen to have that emotional intelligence. I would also say you have to have a clear vision, sort of know where you're going and what it is you want to achieve. So we don't, we knew that we wanted safety for everybody involved, whether they were demonstrators or occupiers or police officers or community members or business owners. So that is the primary goal. And so I didn't get caught up in the noise of all the other things and all the other sort of distractions, but what is going to make it safer for all of our stakeholders? And sometimes that meant that a lot of people weren't happy. Maybe no one is happy with, because everybody has their own perspective, but you really have to stay grounded in what you know to be the right thing to do. And then I would say, when there's a setback, learn from your setbacks, because there were plenty of them. The plan doesn't go as you had intended, things go awry, somebody's not available, whatever that may be. You have to have resilience. And I know everyone on here will attest to that, because I know all of you. And, you have to just be able to take that setback and pivot, to use your word, Janeé, and pivot to the next thing or what might be the better answer in that situation. And then, a lot of collaboration and a lot of making sure that you're empowering others, because none of us, no matter how great your leadership skills are, can do everything and all things on your own. So you have to be able to trust the people around you, empower those folks who have earned that trust to make decisions so that you can, in fact, do the best you can and come up showing your best self.
I like that advice. I think it has a lot to do with following your instincts and also knowing where your skills can then translate. That leads me to a conversation that I had with Janice Ayala last week about how individuals that spend a lifetime in law enforcement will see their skill set very limited when it actually applies to so many other industries. So Janice, like we discussed, right? We often reach a point where we feel we're ready for the next challenge, but aren't sure where to start. What first steps do you recommend for those considering a pivot, and how did you approach that process?
So thank you, Ron. I would say that, unlike a lot of people that I worked with, mostly men that went out and got big jobs because they were in DC or New York or so forth, I decided to take 2 years off. I didn't plan on exactly the amount of time, but I was tired. I needed to recharge my batteries. And during that time, a lot of people were getting into the same type of things that we all expect to in law enforcement, right? Like we're looking at investigative work, security work, anything that's related to intel, or really doing a lot of Department of State, INL or drug work, international assistance to foreign programs, again, working strictly in that law enforcement area. So about 2 years in, after, finding myself at 3 o'clock and wondering how I ever worked because I hadn't done much but exercise or, sweep around, I started getting contacted by a couple of people to work on some compliance issues at an unaccompanied minor facility. And it was kind of amazing because I went and I thought, okay, compliance, what exactly do they want me to do? Outside of I ended up doing a lot of things, but my background would have mostly been in more of anti-money laundering or Bank Secrecy Act compliance. But in just doing that job it was just a 60-day project, I realized that all we do in law enforcement is compliance. Every single thing we do, from, getting a clearance or personal security, assignments, from working internal affairs, from opening a case to cutting a report, seizure, firearms program, defensive tactics. All we work on is rules and regulations and following policy. And we have all of these, dates, 30 days to open a case, or 30 days to make sure you put in a report of investigation and so forth. Anytime you're handling undercover operations, confidential informants, all of that requires compliance, right? Vetting, keeping up with the records and so forth. So you really have to look to see what, the civilian, you say translation is for the job that you do, and think of all of those things that you participated in where you had to either follow the rules, follow the regulations, or ensure that your people were following up with them, and think of what all of those things are. So from a compliance perspective, you can do that kind of work in just about any industry or field. You don't have to be a subject matter expert in the field. You just have to learn it, and you just have to know the rules and be able to connect the dots. So, while I do other things and do some projects for people, my main job is I'm a chief compliance officer for a Japanese precious metals company, a recycler, that has been in business for over 150 years. And I'm doing that here locally, but I've redone their compliance program, and now I'm redoing the entire thing for the whole Japanese and European market. And when I tell you precious metals industry and recycling, that is completely, we're not talking about gold bars that, you don't initially start with that, you end up with that in the recycling business. But to have to learn that part of it's a regulated but semi-unregulated, because they don't have as many rules and, oversight like with banking and money service businesses. So, learning it was the great part, and it just goes to show that you can go into any part of it and learn it on the job. So I mean, just be open to thinking about things and sharing your resumes with other people so that they can help to flush out those kind of key things that you're actually doing that you don't even realize you're doing or taking credit for.
I agree. So a lot of times you'll see executives move from like the auto industry into technology and then to like a beverage company. Though they're very different, right? It's still management of the resources and your employees. So that leads me on to Gina. You've done local police. You are at the county right now. You have leadership roles in a nonprofit with Nolly. What do you think are the key factors to consider when deciding to move into a new role, and how do you ensure a smooth transition into these different leadership positions?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think I'm the perfect one to ask that, because I've been through 4 different agencies now, and of course serve on different boards. So that response is really going to be dependent on where you are in your career. Through experience, I just jumped out there. So my first move was I was a commander, and I was naive and ideal, wanted to go to another place and make it better, right? So my goals were like, I can do it all, and then get there, and then the struggles of getting there, the unknown, not knowing the people. But it was so valuable to me, because at each spot I gained more experience, opportunities to learn, right? More experience. And then the next step was a bigger challenge of another organization that was struggling. And so my first recommendation before I left the city of Atlanta, major city, I was going up the ranks. One mentor was saying, go for it. Another mentor was saying, stay here. So it was divided. So I really made that decision my own. The next step was another agency that was struggling. One mentor was saying, don't go tank yourself. Another was saying, go face the challenge. Ultimately, the work that I did and finding out the surprises once I arrived gave me yet another opportunity to gain even more skills. A lot of the skills were personal skills. A lot of the skills that they talked about before. I had to know who I truly was in order to complete the mission. And the mission ultimately is working together with other people in order to accomplish a goal, right? If you're fighting against other people, you're not accomplishing a goal. So changing and adjusting myself, learning my idiosyncrasies, learning other styles of leadership so that I can talk to people was a major asset. Then when I applied to be the chief of Fayetteville, I went by myself, the unknown. I still was the dream and vision and to make change, and did that. I did it by myself. Took what I learned from the other organizations of first how to deal with people, how to that's your first challenge. What are your style of leadership, and how do you know the people around you style of leadership in that transition? Helped me out a great deal. And so at that time, I was willing to say, I don't need to bring a team on with me. I'll handle it myself. Naive. And then as I navigated that and accomplished that goal, my next step after that, and this is when I say different realms. At that point, I did not have to be a chief again. I could pick and choose and make decisions of where I wanted to go. I knew my value. I know I can do whatever I want. I wanted to make sure whoever I work for understand who I am so that we're not butting heads, and know my values, and make sure the values and the mission of what we're doing in law enforcement align. And that is the most serious advice. Whatever agency you go to, you need to look at the leadership. You need to look at the atmosphere. Read the room before you go. Look at what they've done, what they're accomplishing, and look at, are they in a newspaper? Then if you're the top and going to another city or another county, look at the leadership there. How do they make decisions? What is the atmosphere there? And can you get along with that atmosphere, and can you navigate? I lucked up. I'm winning because I work now for a sheriff who's a very hard worker, who is extremely supportive of the people and what I want to do, because my passion is, now he knew I was the president of NALI. I was going to be the president of NALI at the time, and he accepted and supports that. So all those play a big role. Know where you're going, know who you're going to work for, know the community, and it's easy to do that once you have some tenure or you decide to move. So those are the decisions that I made. I still am preparing, just like Janice said, everyone said, know your skill set. We have an extreme amount of skill sets now because we've had to go and learn a lot of different things. I can go be a hairdresser, a wedding planner, in all things, command level, decision-making, crisis management. We can do it all. What is my passion is a key pivotal thing that people have to decide. What do you love? And whatever you love, if you can go do that, you will be happy, and that will not affect it. So what do you love, and can you go do that where you want to pivot to, then go do that and live your best life.
So I think that I connect with a lot of what you said about learning as you went along, right? Not knowing what you didn't know. But men sometimes have it easier because they have friends that have been in leadership roles before. They have mentorship, or they have transition planning. And Janeé, that's kind of what you're gearing your work towards now, is to providing that for women who may not have the mentorship or the skills with the transition planning, because they don't have people around them that have been in those leadership roles. So how did you seek out mentorship or create opportunities for yourself? And what advice do you have for others looking to do the same?
Well, thanks for having me. I love the points all my, can I say, badass girlfriends are given and colleagues. I just love that. It really is about networking, knowing your value, which people are talking about. Women, we tend to, we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we do. We also don't do a lot of networking. One of the reasons why I created Pivot Point 360 is because pivots sometimes are unexpected. We don't always control. I didn't control it necessarily when I left and retired. You know, I had a major incident and it forced me to have to go. I had to pivot and change into retirement fairly quickly. But I was already planning ahead. I was already networking. I was already thinking, what do I want the next phase of my life to be? Not everybody knows what that is. And sometimes you want to take time to really decide what that is. I didn't, but I don't regret that because there was a lot of opportunities for me then, a lot of things that I could do as a result of my networking. I'd created Titanium Leadership, which I've been working with for years now, because I knew I wanted to go out and help other women. How do you share and network with your value? Start to participate in different conferences and associations. One of the regrets I have is earlier in my career, I like many on the panel, were first. And when you're first, you do it alone. And when there was other organizations that I could participate in, I didn't necessarily do it, and I should have. NOLI is one of them, IAWP, even IACP. Some of those things I didn't actually participate in until I was a chief myself. And then I was on the board of PERF and on the board of Major City Chiefs. But I wish I would have done it earlier, because I would have realized and met some of these ladies earlier that I wasn't alone and that we could share some of those stories. And once you retire, there's a switch in your brain. Many of us have lived our purpose. A lot of people are still looking for their purpose, but we lived ours. And now what are we going to do that gets us as excited as we are now? Yes, we dream of just sitting by the pool, having our cocktails, having our free time, and not managing every crisis out there. The flip side of it is you're losing your title and your rank and your camaraderie, and it's gone. And even when you go to the conferences now, you're an outsider. And I wanted to create a place where those of us that had the experiences connect with those who are at those spaces now. We can meet people where they're at, and we can help them, and they don't have to be alone in the process.
Yeah, I think having community is so important. And I didn't know that this world existed beyond my little bubble in Newark. And I do consider all of you now, not just colleagues, but friends, right? And people that we can rely on. It's so important to have that. My next question is for Janice. Transitioning from federal law enforcement into new sectors like consulting or nonprofit leadership, or the private sector like yourself, comes with unique challenges. What were the biggest hurdles that you faced in that shift, and how did you effectively translate your law enforcement expertise to succeed in these new environments?
I think going back to a previous point made is that like I didn't have a major incident, but I did go through a transition as far as becoming a widow, in 2012 suddenly. And I had, teenagers that were getting ready to graduate from high school the following June, and an older daughter further away. So I went from kind of having a house full of dance team and people over the weekend to a empty nester, completely alone in that sense. So on top of the types of work that I did and the, position that I had, I was already like, burning the candle at both ends, trying to be a spouse, a mom, and still doing my job. So I think at the beginning, there's a lot of challenges. Like when I retired, I knew that it was time to retire. I think you have to ensure that you know who you are, that the job itself is just a job. Whether you get to be good at it or get to love it, it's a means to an end. And I think that's why I believe that women make better adjustments when they give up the badge or go into retirement, because they know who they are, and so going back to the women's, having someone to pull you up, and I've had a couple of women pull me up that are still with me, still pulling me up, and I in turn do that for everyone else. And while my population was like 95%, or I should say 85% male, at least, I did dedicate the same amount of time to them, but a little bit extra here. But with that said, the job opportunities or getting pulled along by your male counterparts or into just seems not to be there. All right. So I think you have to decide what it is that you want. Like, do you want to go to a 9-to-5 job? Do you want to work from home? Are you mobile? What kind of family obligations do you have? Because I think the biggest mistake is deciding that we're going to pursue something and then not being able to say okay on the spot to something, and then having regrets later because we weren't prepared for all of that. So as you decide what you're going to do, or, you know, if you decide you are going to seek post-retirement work, then I suggest, like, a lot of people, we forget how much access we have to like certifications on the job, or like these, you know, universities, like with DHS, I remember with customs, you could go in and for free become a contracting officer, or do some program management, or get a certification for OSHA, whatever it is. So I would say that while you're in, try to get as much as you can by those small things, because you will be shocked at how much that translates into project management positions, and whether it be federal, state, or local contracts. You know, like I did like use of force audits on, you know, state of Washington, you know, use of force incidents that resulted in death or not. And you think, well, why would I? Well, all of you done, it's an investigation, right? An audit is an investigation. I wasn't planning on doing that. I had never done something like that before, even though I worked for internal affairs, you know, for 3 years in my agency. It just wasn't, you know, but you know, it's the same basic concept to that. So looking at those kind of things before you retire, what you can get out of your anti-money laundering, or you know, CFT, there's so many certifications that you can get in that area, and you're always going to be able to be set up for that. So I wasn't trying to get work, but when I did get people reaching out to me, I think that the main concept there is like needing someone to take care of business, and to be able to lead in it, and to be able to push back on, you know, the usual, you know, ideas that seem great but are not, from our past experience, and, you know, and doing that over and over again. So you need to look at your skill set, break it out into pieces, and like the mentoring piece is good, because we talk about skill set, but oftentimes we don't say, well, what is the overall impact of what we did? So I spoken to my, you know, my WIFLE sisters, if I will, the other day, and we're talking about, I had set a contract for 3 years, which I started out, and you know, for another company that asked me to do this for them. I thought it was for a year, and then they ended up, thank God it's over, so I could just concentrate on other things. But the majority of the people are processing, you know, undocumented immigrants on the border. So when they were talking about their resumes, as you know, we're trying to start, they said, well, you know, what are we going to write? We process, you know, undocumented immigrants. And I said, well, is that what you're really doing? I mean, you have a high level clearance, the same as any, you know, Border Patrol agent out there. You're entering, you're gathering, you're interviewing subjects, utilizing bilingual skills. You're collecting data and entering into, you know, sensitive government systems. And that data has to be accurate and follows that person basically for the rest of their life. You know, so there's so many aspects of what you're doing, you know, from a national security or public safety, and you have to like just break out your skill sets and the impact it's having. Like if you are a firearms instructor, that's a national program for federal, and maybe a state program if you're working in the state. And so when you can say you're, you know, looking at larger scale programmatic areas, don't think some big program, think of the day-to-day things that you're involved with that require, you know, oversight from a, you know, firearms instructor, defensive tactics, or any other skill that you use. So I would say that knowing yourself and being able to say yes or no by doing an evaluation about what you really want to accomplish and what kind of job you want and what you're willing to do is going to be your best, I think the best advice I could give you.
Yeah, when I met you last week, a lot of what you said resonated, right? Now that you retire and you're ready to spend all this time with your family, you have an empty nest. So yeah, that's a lot to probably for another topic, another webinar. Next question is, Carmen, you successfully transitioned from leading a major city to an executive role in the private industry. How did your position in law enforcement align your skills with the needs of the private industry, and what aspects of that experience gave you a competitive edge, or what could have made that transition easier or smoother?
Yeah, that's also another great question again, Yvonne. But I would say this, It's as was pointed out previously, we have so many skills that we have and that we utilize in law enforcement. And so some are written here in the chat, but there's so many things that we're doing, organizational skills, crisis management, other things. But the private sector is different than law enforcement. So you have to recognize that. And there's a saying, I heard it from Russell Wilson, who was our Seahawks quarterback, but I'm sure it's been said other times. It's like preparation is separation. So ensuring that you're prepared and understanding as much as you can about wherever your activity will take you. I went into Microsoft. I worked at a private security company for a little while before that, but it is different. They are really focused on the bottom line. You know, it's a $67 billion a year company. It's got, 800,000 employees. It's a big place. And so you kind of have to understand, be a real self-motivated person and learn very quickly. If you have an MBA or something like that, it's great. But if you don't, you need to quickly start picking up on things like, what is a CapEx? What is an OpEx? What is the ROI? What's a KPI, which is a key performance indicator? What's a PKI, public key infrastructure? I mean, all of those things, you'll need to know that. And they talk in jargon all the time. So I did a lot of reading and catching up with just understanding, some of the nuances about the company. And you should educate yourself, really commit to continuous improvement and continuous learning and growth. So I feel like I know so much more now, although I learned a lot through the challenges in policing. I couldn't talk about Azure or, or machine learning or artificial intelligence to the degree that I can now, and how we utilize that in security and other areas, like I do now, simply because of the job I have. So I think, learning as much as you can about wherever you think you are going to want to land. I don't think this is my last stop, but certainly it has been a great education and a wonderful experience. And also learning, for me, how to work. I think we were just starting to do virtual stuff. We were just moving into COVID and doing meetings like we're having now. But, when you work for a global company where some of your employees are, 12 hours ahead and some of them are 9 hours behind, you learn quickly how to, manage time and make things work. So that's my long-winded way of saying, be prepared, know what you're going into, start picking up. And the last thing I'll say is what two other people have already said, is use your mentors and your allies. Call people up. They know people. They'll know somebody who's been there before, who's worked there before, who has information that can help you to walk in the door much more prepared.
Funny when you mentioned all the acronyms. I thought policing was bad with the alphabet soup. I started working with the nonprofits, and I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
I know.
Can you dumb it down so I know, kind of follow along on the conversation? Yeah, it's not just law enforcement with all the acronyms. The next question is Gina. You've held leadership roles across multiple law enforcement agencies. Each has its own culture, like Carmen and I were just talking about the private industry. What were the biggest obstacles you faced when stepping into a new agency or leadership role, and how did you establish credibility and drive meaningful change in those transitions where there's different cultures?
Yes, so great question, because I navigated a major city, then went to a small agency, which was right at 100, then mid-size, and now a little bit larger, it's 800 people in our agency. So the biggest challenge, and how, well, let's go for how did I navigate? I shared before, I had to learn and realize what I didn't know, but I came with knowledge. So I came with knowledge and skills that were undeniable that they needed, right? And that's not what I needed. What I needed for me was to truly getting to understand other people's style, because me just telling them, no, trust me, believe me, I'm here to help, right? They didn't want to believe it, especially if people were threatened. And I think to a certain point, you're going to go into an environment where people are going to feel threatened about who you are. They either don't know you, they think you might take their position, you're going to stop them from getting something. So you're going to automatically have people trying to attack. But staying on mission, which is what is the objective? Having the experience and then gaining the experience. Cannot say that enough. You are going to learn something wherever you go, and If you are not, it is up to you. The responsibility is up to you to proactively always be learning. So I have a Audible because I multitask all the time, but I have many books that I learn from. Most of them are about leadership and leadership styles. That is the next thing. So because the challenge of facing who do I get to work with, right? What is their culture? I had to learn through multiple ways of just facing reality, but I had to learn a lot of different leadership personality tests, and mine have evolved. If you take a lot, as long as you work, your leadership style will evolve. You will be able to adjust, and you will have to adjust with your style depending on who you're talking to or who you're engaged with, right? And you need that. You need to know, oh, okay, you can't communicate with them in this certain matter. So that's one of the biggest challenges was communication and the fact of getting to learn who you are, because you're going into a culture that's you're unknown. So you got to first learn that culture. And then if the culture needs to adjust with whatever your values are, and if my values are consistent fairness, constitutional law, then we're going to do that. And I realize people are going to fight with it, but I'm going to love you while I do it. I'm going to be consistent with it, and I don't get tired. I think the benefit I didn't realize I had, I'm not a quitter. So there was not a failure was not an option for me. It was like, okay, this is what I got. Okay, let's do it. The other challenge, and this is for the room, personal issues, life is going to happen.
Yeah.
So because I also was going in one of those sessions, I always have children going through a divorce, that gave me another opportunity to learn something else differently. Learning the 5 love languages, learning how to live by myself and realize, no, you're winning no matter what. But bringing your personality, your personal growth or personal issues that are real have to be acknowledged in the profession. You know, at that same time, the other challenge personally I had, I was working so hard, stress kicked my butt. And I got admitted to the hospital in full uniform because they said your body's shutting down. Recognizing the things that you have to recognize personally is a challenge that you have to face also. But ultimately, communication was the biggest challenge, and letting people know that I care about them, even though they may not have cared about me. If you're truly in this profession and you care about people, you're going to love people that hate you because of your values, because what's your mission. And if that stays consistent, they can impact you. You know, another one of books that I love is Jocko, Extreme Ownership. Understanding, nope, what can I do to make this better? I'm not going to be a victim. What can I do to bring this person along? I need to figure that out. I need to figure those tools out. So that's what I did.
So I'm also a fan of audiobooks, and what I learned is that I learn better by listening than reading, which
Yes,
I never knew
absolutely.
before.
It's
Also,
like,
thank you.
and if they're reading it,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah. I love audiobooks. I think I'm doing more audiobooks now than written books.
yes.
And I want to thank you for sharing, some of your personal experiences, because a lot of times we feel like we have to carry burdens on our own when there's other people that are going through similar incidents. And Carmen may not know this, but I was going through something personally, and then I read about her going through it. So she didn't know that she was even like giving me encouragement, though she didn't know that we were experiencing the same thing. So, this
Yvonne,
community is so important.
can I add one small thing to
so-
that? Can I add one small thing, Yvonne? So Janeé said this. We didn't know who's out there that are like us.
Yeah.
I didn't find that out until I went to NA in 2013 and met 2 amazing women, live across the country. And it was the eye-opening thing of, you're going through it too, that made us feel that we're not alone any longer. So that's the key point. We're not alone. You have somebody, you have us. So that was another point.
Yeah, and it's normal, and all folks have stuff, and we shouldn't carry it like a secret. It's a burden, right? It's life, and we navigate life and careers, and that's what this is about, right? Men recognize that through their networking, through their relationships, they have someone to talk to. Women need the same thing, and I think that's why I loved so much what Janeé is doing right now. When she told me about it and she reached out, I thought it was such a great idea. I said we should do a webinar. So Janeé, Pivot Point 360 emphasizes that retirement is just the start of a new chapter. So what mindset shifts are most important for women looking to build a meaningful post-law enforcement career?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that you guys are bringing up the personal component, because that's part of the mind shift change. is we are more than the rank we held. I hear people say, I'm just a cop, or I'm just this. And frankly, we're CEOs of our own life. We're multitasking, we're managing all these personal things. But when we look, and if we're not being authentic and telling people our story of the personal challenges we have along with our professional challenges, I think our other sisters coming up in the ranks are going to think, well, they did all this stuff flawless, you know, they were perfect, or they didn't have issues. I have A, B, C, and D. I'm here to tell you, I can match everyone that said divorce, you know, challenges with health. I mean, I'm breaking down now from all the years of stress. I've got high cortisol and thyroid and things I never thought I'd have. I got to have reading glasses. I've had perfect vision. There's all this stuff, but it goes back to the community. Having people who understand where you've been and where you're going, and being able to, you know, I said in the beginning, Pivot Point actually was created out of my own frustration. When I left the police department, I became the president and eventually CEO of a startup technology company. We helped people communicate that had invisible conditions or mental health conditions that couldn't communicate with law enforcement, to help people from getting shot and unintended consequences. I loved that. I loved what I was doing. But as we started evolving the business, I actually wasn't doing the things that I loved the most. I was raising funds and doing some things in the private sector that Carmen talked about that you didn't quite expect. So really understanding where you want to go with that. So one of the things we've done too is we just had a webinar. I love that you guys are doing webinars. This is what's helpful. It's sharing information, hearing from people. We had Sheepdog Resume on. Our sisters out there are not thinking about how to create a resume. When I started the police department in 1987, I'm aging myself, long time ago. We didn't have LinkedIn. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have a lot of things, frankly. And now the way people get jobs, how they build a resume, interview process, cover letters, LinkedIn. I mean, if you don't have certain things set up in your resume, nobody's even going to call you back. So you might want to be something, but you have to understand what the new world is like and how you can participate. Some people don't even know how to do Zoom calls. I've had to have meetings with people, sergeants, lieutenants, and they don't even know how to do a Zoom call, so end up being on the phone. So it's just, how do we find our place as we grow through an organization? We have that camaraderie, we have that connection, we have that purpose, and then we leave and we're lost. I don't want people to be lost. I don't want them to be lost as they're growing up in the organization, and I don't want them to be lost when they're gone, because we still are relevant. We still have value. We still have things to bring to the table, and we can still help people.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the importance of networking, and it's something that I didn't realize until very late in my career after I started making rank. You could be doing a fantastic job if no one knows about it. No one knows about it, right? So we're going to do a round robin style, and please give our listeners some practical strategies on how to leverage a professional network or how to establish a professional network beyond law enforcement. Who wants to go first?
I can start since I'm already unmuted, but I would say this, and you've already heard some of this today, but joining organizations is really important. We have the president of NALI on here, we have WIFLE represented here, but also, you know, there's also women in policing type organizations, if that's what you're into, and you know, if you're doing law enforcement. I'm on in this group called LIT, for ladies in tech. Also, Ignite, helping girls in tech. Also, IOBSC, International Association of Black Security Executives, RELA, Retail, Investigative, I can't remember all the stuff. But there's so many groups out there. You name it, there's one for something. And so join those groups, attend a conference. Sometimes Microsoft does not pay for the conferences that I go to, but I go anyway. They're not going to pay for me to go necessarily to because I'm in the security field. They will for some of them, but not necessarily to like the Noble Conference. But it's important to me to connect with those law enforcement executive leaders. So I go, and I'm happy to pay out of my pocket to do that because I get so much from it. So I would say, so I don't take up all the time, but join these groups, participate locally, nationally, so that you learn so much from that, and people will remember you as you participate. Something to become available, and they'll say, "Oh, we're giving this class." Or, for example, recently I spoke at the Mopop, which is no big deal for most of you, but in Seattle it's kind of a big museum that's really popular, simply because I met somebody through another channel, so when they ask you to come, they ask you to speak. So those types of things, and that's all through networking and staying close to, people through those organizations.
I'll add a little bit to that. She said it all. The only thing I'm gonna add is this. Don't just join, serve. Don't just join, connect. Be a participant in it. Don't just say I have the checklist, I'm a member. Once you start either connecting with people that are not associated with your agency, but you can learn something from someone else, then you build not just a network of professionals, then you become a friend. And it takes work to be a friend because you got to be proactive, you got to communicate. Then you have the opportunities on those organizations to serve on maybe a committee, a subcommittee to help solve a problem. And then all of a sudden you have opportunities, people know you. And then that's how, when people have to think about positions, oh, I know this person, and they'll go quick to know who they know versus waiting for a resume. So definitely join, but also act.
I agree. Janeé or Janice?
I was just going to say, amen, sister. If you are seeking mentorship or coaching, become that. And don't limit your experiences and your connections and the associations you go to just law enforcement. The more you can broaden your connections, and every conference I went to, I'd meet somebody that was a part of Microsoft or a part of Axon or all these different organizations and these businesses that I might someday want to be a part of. So get to meet them, understand their culture. I always say, I definitely know I picked the right profession, but there were times I questioned, did I pick the right department? So you got to make sure it's the right culture for you. That's a big thing, but really connect with people outside of that. And if it doesn't exist, create it.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful with thinking that just because an organization represents something, that it's a right fit for you. Many years ago, I mean, when we were still customs, I was doing a Secret Service detail, other Treasury agent, and it was the 50th NATO anniversary, and we were in Washington, D.C., and this Ronald Reagan building had just opened, but it wasn't fully open. Nobody had moved there, but there was a food court, and that's where we all congregated. So I remember we had like a Hispanic association with customs that was joint with ATF, and I heard somebody asked me if I was a member, and I said I wasn't. And then it was the guys from California and LA, and then they started talking about the South Texas Hispanics and how different the mentality was with the Caribbean Hispanics. And I just said, yeah, no. And I'm not ever going to be a member of an association like that, because if the purpose is to find some common ground and your startup point is all these differences based on where you live in the States and so forth, or where you grew up, then to me, that wasn't a good fit. Like, I didn't need that. With WIFLE, I think, I felt an automatic connection to, because of course I came in and many of the women that came before me were some of the first. WIFLE had the trailblazers and the anniversary last year. And there was just this sense of pride and the sense of being able to see yourself in someone else. You know what I mean? So being part of WIFLE not gave me that on the way up, but also on the way down, right? To be able to, represent my agency and have women say, okay, like I can see, it doesn't matter if you're married or if you have children or if you do this, I can maybe aspire to this because they're there and they're in our organizations, like we can touch it or whatever. So I found that to be such a meaningful connection point. But I fear too that sometimes along the way, like you said, it's not just to be a member of something and click the box. It's like, how do you utilize it for your own advantage, and how can what you learn from it be put back into the organization to make it better. So I always tell people, you know, when they tell me, hey, thank you for looking at my, you know, my, you know, senior executive qualifications or my resume or whatever, you know, what can I do? What can I do? And I said, well, you have to pay it forward, because that is the whole point. Like, yeah, I don't have to do it, but I feel obligated to do it. And here I am in 5 years of retirement, and I'm still doing it. You know, people will reach out and they'll ask me, and I'll do, you know, people from my agency, people from other agencies, people that I've met at WIFLE, people that I've met on planes, because I'm always on planes, and they'll reach out and they'll ask, hey, can you help me out with this, and or point them in the right direction. But I suggest that you make as many connections as you can while you're still in or through some of these organizations, because once you're out, it becomes harder and harder to really make meaningful connections. I'll give you an example with me. I'm 62. And hey, I've been a widow for 12 years. And, you know, when my husband died, I said, I'm never going to remarry. And people thought, oh, woe is me. Poor Janice doesn't think she's going to meet anybody. And I go, no, like, this is a decision. You know, I had a family along, you know, decades of raising, then that was why I got married. And now I'm done with that. So if I want to go have fun or do this or whatever, that's my business, but I will never remarry, and I will never have someone living in my house, you know? With that said, when I go out, I'm in my neighborhood restaurant, this or whatever, people are very nice, and people always want your number and they want this or whatever. But in actuality, at a certain age, people already have, if they're living in a community, their friends, established family. If they've just moved in and they're in couples, they gravitate to couples. And it's hard to break into that as a single woman, you know, even because that's the way it's viewed. It's kind of weird. It's like, you know, when somebody dies, people are always bringing food over to poor John. You know, poor John, he needs food. You know, his wife isn't there, can't cook for him. But they don't bring food to the woman's house after a while because they're not really figured the woman could. And so it's kind of the same mentality. So I'm just trying to say that try to make as many connections now, and try to utilize people that are on, like, organizations that are on here now, to see how you can, again, learn from it and how you can get more involved and contribute and give us better ideas. Like, because it's true, some of us are retired, even though we're in communication. I have 3 daughters, so I'm always dealing with that. So, you know, and one of my daughters is actually, you know, on the job, just like I was, you know, same organization. So, but things have changed. So you have to stay relevant and be around younger people that have different perspectives, and try to find out, like, what they see as their major struggles, you know, not to be, you know, outdated or stale. So just try to do the connecting now, and look at other places too. Like, for instance, this is weird, but I don't drink bourbon, but I'm part of a bourbon club. Why? Because while I was doing a special project, you know, I happened to be out by Fort Sam over here, and they have this clock tower. It's a beautiful place. And they have a bourbon club. And what are they? They're like community, mostly community, military people or whatever. So you can actually meet more people in the community leaders, business people, crisis centers, bereavement centers, through those interactions sometimes, than just trying to be in your regular community. So, you know, just go out on a limb. Somebody asks you about something like that. So I'm like, okay, like, I could have said I don't drink bourbon, which of course I had to at one point, but and bring my own wine, but I still participate. And, you know, it leads me to a lot of different things. Also, doing mediation and volunteering for other agencies is a great way to make inroads. I did mediation for, you know, Office of Personnel Management for the military. So while that's a federal thing, I'm sure there's other opportunities within policing a state where when something happens, you know, people have to recuse themselves. They might ask for someone to come in as an objective party and do some mediation. And that's a way of making other connections, you know, and getting to know a little bit more about what other people are doing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all very good suggestions, right? You have to think on when do you have opportunities to connect. I like something that Carmen said about paying for a conference if it's no other way to do it, right? I myself paid for a training that wasn't made available and in my agency, but I knew that I needed if I was to be competitive to become a chief. So I paid out of pocket. And you can write it off on your taxes. And then the thing about making those connections where people know your name, so often decisions on who's going to be hired is based on recommendations from decision makers at the table. So the more people you connect with, the more people that know your interest and what you're good at, the more opportunities that you'll be exposed to. So we have just one quick last minute question where we're gonna go around. What's one piece of advice that you could give someone based on your experience that is considering transitioning into another chapter in their career? Let's start with Janice, alphabetical order, and then we'll go Ayala, Best, and Hawkins and Harteau. Did I get that right? No, Harteau, Hawkins. Alphabetical order.
Okay. I would say just remember that we're always in transition and it's scary. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone into the job, like, you know, whatever it was, first becoming a supervisor or something, and wondered, oh my God, like, you know, it's petrifying. Like, am I going to do good or whatever? And after about like 3 hours, you're like, yeah, okay, this is like, why was I so stressed and crazy about it? So the one thing that they cannot take away from you at a table is knowledge. No matter where you're sitting, if you're the only chick, like I was when I was, you know, the SAC down in, you know, for Texas, I was the only woman at the table most of the time. You know, with a rough crowd, let me tell you, this is, I'm here, the sheriffs and all of it, whatever. But while maybe, you know, and I was not from Texas. So it was kind of hard to break through, but for maybe like 10 minutes. Because when issues came up or whatever, I made sure I knew my business. And that I always tell people, you have to be able to answer 3 questions in. So you get a question, and that's like what I do when I prepare for congressional testimony, right? They ask you a question and you give them the answer. And of course you put in the answer what you want them to hear. And then imagine that they're going to ask you another question that you have to justify or that you have to make more specific. Then make sure you know it down to that detail. And imagine that then you're going to get challenged further. You know your stuff. When you know your stuff, that's when you arrived, and that's when you can take over a table. And just feel confident in the fact that you can do it. Because all you have to do is learn it. You have to learn it and learn it and learn it. I mean, I used to read my congressional testimony to my kids. How does it sound? Sometimes they're the best audience because they're going to tell you, oh, mom, like you keep stopping at this word, like change, it doesn't sound right or something like that.
Worst critics.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just use whatever it is and people around you and ask me a question and know it. And when you have it down hard, that's where you're going to be able to outshine and outdo and outwork anybody.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you so
Thanks.
much.
Carmen? Carmen, you're up next.
Okay, I just had to
One
unmute
piece of
myself.
advice you would give someone. And she's
Yeah,
going-
yeah, great, thank you. I love what you had to say there, Janice, about knowledge. I'm gonna steal my advice from Sonia Quinones, who I know used to be a part of Nolly, but I say this all of the time. I quote her all the time. Everything is about relationships. It's about the ships, friendships, partnerships, and relationships. Develop them, nurture them, keep them going, because that will serve you well as you move forward in helping others and seeking help as well.
Okay, and then next, Janeé.
Here I was thinking it was Gina first, but I forgot that's not alphabetical. So my advice, prepare to pivot. No pun intended, but honestly, you have to expect the unexpected, and you have to, the more you prepare when something happens, whether it's you're planning towards it or it's something you couldn't see coming, you're much better off. And the last little piece of that is women think they have to check all the boxes in whatever the requirements are. You have to have this, you have to know that, you have to have this. We think we have to do it all and we still question ourselves. Men are okay if they check off one and they're like,
That's right.
There's research on that.
Yeah. So we got to just cut ourselves some slack and help lift each other up like the men do. We don't do that enough. We see each other as competition. I've got no time for that. We are not competition. We need to lift each other up, share what we know, and just remember our own value, like we said early on.
That's great advice. Gina, what do you
Great,
think?
everyone. Great advice, everyone. I think what I want to add, probably to add on top of that, is there's always going to be that person sitting on that left-hand side, talking in your head, talking to your brain. Click that person off. Remind this person who you are.
Yeah.
Read your receipts because you have it. And then go find one of us or one of you, because when you doubt it, I will be your hype person. I will tell you and remind you everything that you've done, everything you've overcame, and remind you, stop talking negatively to yourself. Don't be your own worst critic. And if you think about it, even if you think it, words are so powerful. If you say it, if you think it, you're listening to it. You're telling yourself that. Stop telling yourself. But it takes, you have to be an advocate. You have to reassure yourself every single day, whether that is reading a book, whether that is listening to a song, calling your best friend. I send my best friend things all the time. So I'm like, yes, you're the best ever, and vice versa, right? You need to stop talking negatively to yourself, encourage your next partner, peer, and remind yourself of all the great work that you've done, because you've done it.
Thank you, Gina. And that's, I think, the most important thing I've learned in the past, like 4 or 5 years, right? Be kind to myself. I'm my own best friend, right? It took a long time for me to get there. So with that, I want to thank you all for.
Can I chime in for one thing real quick?
I was going to hand it to you.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So it's been insightful and inspiring. So we've learned that these are deeply personal decisions, and there's no right way or wrong way to do it. We all have our own path and our own challenges and opportunities. So whether it's stepping into leadership or moving into a new industry or prioritizing personal fulfillment, what matters most is that transition aligns with your values and your inspiration. So ladies, thank you so much. You've been an incredible panel, and thank you for sharing your experiences and wisdom. Tanya has requested that we share our favorite books, and she's going to email it to everyone. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tanya so she can close this out and let us know if there's any last questions people want answered.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being here. And Yvonne, I know you're the moderator today, but you're right there with the, what do we call them, Gina? BFDs?
Big freaking deal. You're a big freaking deal.
One thing that I would say, in early on in my career in NYPD, I was very insulated and I did not network to the extent I should have. That was a valuable lesson for me later on. And part of it was my own fear of reaching out to someone like Carmen Best, Janeé Harteau, Janice, Gina. I will say, knowing these women and knowing a lot of women like them, they're available to you. They will talk to you. And if they don't have time, they're going to tell you. And they're going to say, you know what, but I can offer you this person. So for those of you that are younger in your careers and kind of think like, I can't necessarily communicate at that same, at that level or whatever the case may be, don't do that. And that's part of what's great about Pivot Point is it gives space for some of those conversations to happen, as well as the organizations like Nolly and WIFLE. But, if you have one of these women that you want to talk to, do it. The worst that happens is they say no, and they help you find someone else that doesn't have that has more time at that moment. And I feel very comfortable saying that. And thank you all for being here and for being in our network. And shout out to Regina Lombardo, who we saw on here, and a couple of other people. And we'll get those books to you. I think Gina already gave me some. And yeah, Janeé, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And push that out there again, if you don't mind, so the folks on the line can take a look at what Pivot Point is doing as well.
Thank you.
And that's what we have for today. I think we do have a question about whether any of you are comfortable giving out your LinkedIn contact information to connect with participants. So if you are comfortable, then I think if you send any of these women a note and tell them, hey, we were on this webinar, I would love to connect with you. I think I think most of them will say yes.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
excited.
Connected with
Ah.
lots of people on LinkedIn messages. So whoever would like to reach out on LinkedIn, I may be a little slow sometimes, but I do get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'm still in the public sector, so you can always find me.
Thanks so much. If you can't find them on LinkedIn, because we're running out of time, then reach out to me or Yvonne and we'll locate, we know how to track these women down. And just, thank you so much for being here. Happy Women's History Month, everyone. And stay safe, stay strong. You got this.